Hi boys and girls, so I'm doing lesson 6-6, perfect squares. So in this lesson, we're going to be representing the product of two-digit numbers using arrays, area models, or equations, including perfect squares through 15 by 15. So my problem says, each of the larger squares can be filled exactly with small squares. How many small squares are needed to fill each larger square? So I'm going to underline my question because I don't have any numbers in here. So like if I'm doing my cubes, I'm going to underline my question. How many small squares are needed to fill each larger square? Okay, I'm going to box in how many small squares. I'm going to box in the word each. I'm going to box in the word exactly. Okay. So I know each can tell me that I'm going to multiply. So it says each of the larger squares can be filled with exactly small squares. Okay, so so I have a look at my squares. I have 1, 2, 3, 4. It's already telling me the first one is 1 square. Okay, well, how did they get 1 square? To get that, they did 1 times 1 equals 1. Okay, that's how they got 1 square. So now we want to find out, okay, well, how many are in this square? So now let's say if I have 1 here, let me do 2 now. I'm going to do 2 times 2. I'm going to use the same factor, 2 times 2, and I should know that's 4. So that means there's 4 squares in this one. And split it in half and I get 4. Okay, so I have 1, 1, 2, 2. The next one, I'll do 3. So I'll do 3 times 3, and we should know that equals 9. So there are 9 squares in this one. So I'm going to make 9 squares. Okay. So again, I have 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, and then last I will have 4 times 4, which we should know is 16. So now I'm going to make 16 squares. Okay. So now if you look at this and you're noticing that my equations that I have here, they each have the same factor. They're multiplying by the same factor. For example, I have 1, 1. Those are my factors. They're the same factors. And my 1 right here, I can say is a perfect square. Okay. Again, for my 2 2's, I can say these 2's are the same factor. So my 4 is my perfect square. Okay. To my 3's, again, I can say it has the same factor, 3's, and my perfect square is 9. Okay. With 4, again, I can say it has the same factors, 4, and 16 is my perfect square. So if you notice the pattern with the perfect square, you notice that I'm going to use 4. You notice that you know you have a perfect square if you are using the same 2 factors. Okay, you have to get the same 2 factors. And you know that your perfect square will be 16. Because 4 times 4 is 16. Okay? So those are what perfect squares are. So let me go to the next page. A more detail on the perfect square. It says the product of a whole number and itself is called a perfect square. So let's highlight that. The product of a whole number and itself is a perfect square. So it's asking, is 30 a perfect square? Well, let's find out. So before we find out, it's showing us examples of perfect squares. So we already talked about how 1 is a perfect square, 9 is a perfect square, 25 is a perfect square. And again, I said, you know it's a perfect square if it has the same factors, 1 and 1, 3 and 3, 5 and 5. Okay. You also know because it has the same number of squares. So I have 1 square. Okay. Here I have 1, 2, 3. Again, I have 1, 2, 3. I have 3 on both sides. For 5, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Again, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have 5 on each side, the top and the side. Those are perfect squares. On the bottom, it says, can you put 30 counters in a perfect square? So this is where they're asking, is 30 a perfect square? Okay. Well, the only way I know to get 30 is 2 ways. I know to get 30 by doing 3 times 10 equals 30. And I know to get 30 by doing 5 times 6 is 30. If I look at my 2 factors here, 3 and 10, 5 and 6, actually if I look at my 4 factors, I notice that they are not the same. 3 and 10 are not the same number. 5 and 6 are not the same number. So I already have a red flag there. I already know 30 is probably not a perfect square. But let me just double check. So if I count my little squares here, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If I count again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They do not have the same number. I have 5 here, but I have 6 here. So I can say, it says it right here, so 30 is not a perfect square. Okay, it has to have the same 2 factors. And here we just get more examples of perfect squares. We have 25 because we have 2 of the same factors. We have 36 because we have 2 of the same factors.